Thank you very much. Glad to be here with you. So today I'm going to be talking about global digital ad fraud. First, I'll start with some background and set some context. What is ad fraud? Very simply, ad fraud in the digital space is basically bots loading web pages instead of humans loading web pages. So normally you would expect a human visiting a website to see the ads. So when they load the page, the ads are loaded. However, when we move into the programmatic space, the number of websites have grown dramatically, and the number of users have also grown dramatically. But some of those users are actually bots loading the web pages to cause the ads to load. So because the ads are not shown to humans, we consider that fraud because that is not what the advertisers paid for. And the problem really came about when programmatic started because in the physical space, in the physical world, there's only so much space that we can use to put billboards or put ads in magazines and things like that. So if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a finite amount of space and there's only so many billboards you can put by the roadside. However, when we move into the virtual space in digital, you can now create unlimited websites and generate unlimited ad impressions. So the example that I have here is a website that has no content whatsoever, but as you can see, there's many, many ads loaded on them. So you can think of these as digital billboards. So when we moved into the digital space and we removed the constraints of the physical world, we now have a way to generate a lot of impressions. And unfortunately, the fraudsters are actually taking advantage of that and generating many, many fraudulent impressions to be sold through programmatic channels. And if we look at the humans' usage of the internet, social, and mobile, we see those two lines, the yellow and the green. Both of those lines are now plateaued, meaning they're kind of horizontal. So the number of humans getting online, the number of humans using social and mobile have pretty much flattened out. It's maximized already. However, using US numbers, you can see the blue line, which is digital ad spend, continue to go upward. And there's an increasing gap between the amount of digital spend and the amount of time that humans use digital, internet, social, and mobile. So in that case, if those ad impressions are not being generated by humans, the question is, who's generating them? And you can kind of guess it's going to be bots and automated software programs that are repeatedly loading web pages using mobile apps in order to generate a lot of fraudulent ad impressions. And the process is actually very straightforward. As you saw in the slide before, there are sites that have no content at all. They have 100% ads on them because their sole purpose is to generate ad impressions to sell through ad exchanges. So you might wonder, how do these sites get the traffic? Well, humans don't know about them. So humans are not going to be visiting those sites. So those sites go out and buy all their traffic, right? So step one is to set up the fake site. Step two is to buy the fake traffic. And the fake traffic is obviously from bots because you cannot compel millions of humans to go to specific websites that they've never heard of before. But the most reliable way to do that is to use botnets. So when you have very large botnets, you can actually issue one command to tell them visit this website 10 million times because they paid for 10 million page views. That's what buying traffic means. And when you combine the fake site with the fake traffic, you now have a lot of fake ads to sell through the ad exchanges. If you look at these examples, look at the inset, some of these sites and mobile apps can generate nearly 1 billion ad impressions per day to sell through the exchanges. So we're talking very, very large quantities here. And on top of that, these bots are actually smart. What they can do is avoid detection, right? So on the one hand, on the left-hand side, you'll see that they can block the detection tags. So there are some technologies that are designed to look for bots or detect bots and fraudulent activity. However, the bots are blocking those tags to evade detection. And then on the right-hand side, you can also see an example of where malicious code was used to defeat viewability detection. So even though the ads were not viewable, the malicious code manipulated the measurement so that it made them appear to be viewable. So again, these are techniques that the fraudsters are using to evade detection. And then you can see here examples of many, many traffic sellers. So if you just Google the words buy real human traffic or just buy traffic, buy valid traffic, you'll see hundreds of vendors selling all sorts of traffic. So this is not a small phenomenon. Ad fraud is a very large phenomenon, and there are many, many people benefiting from it and making money off of it. So obviously the next question is, how big is ad fraud? I'm going to be talking about this from the global perspective, but as you can imagine, there are emerging markets that are going to be affected more and more by ad fraud as they get more and more into programmatic. So there's not a clear answer in terms of what the total amount of ad fraud is, but let me show you some evidence. So every year since 2016, there have been discoveries of the largest ever botnets. So 2016, they called it MethBot. 2017, they called it HiveBot. 2018, they called it Eve. 2019, we saw a mobile app maker cheat by using the many, many billions of app installed on people's phones to just load ads in the background and generate ad fraud that way. And then in 2020, we have Ice Bucket, and this is an example of a new form of fraud in connected TV. So here's an example. Since 2020, there's been 9 examples of cases of CTV fraud. So again, I'm just using these examples. Each of these have been named, but just to give you a sense of how prevalent the fraud is in the digital space. Okay, so all of these are linked in the deck. And then if you look at some of the sites that we see in our analytics data, on the left-hand side, you'll see some domains that are literally just letters and numbers. No humans are ever going to type that in to go to those websites. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see screenshots of dozens upon dozens of apps. Most of those are just cloned, right? Sometimes the fraudsters don't even bother to change the cover icon on these apps because they're just cloning them so that they can make hundreds and hundreds of apps for the purpose of ad fraud. Because the only thing that those apps are doing is loading more ads in the background. They're really not meant for humans to use and play and things like that, right? They're solely used for ad fraud. And then you can also get a sense of these other forms of fraud and how large they are. So on the left-hand side, we see examples of pop-unders or forced redirects. So the humans don't actually cause these to happen, right? But the pop-ups or pop-unders happen when they're browsing the web. There are also something called forced redirects. So they are redirected to some other site and they're redirected over and over again to other pages. The human is actually not causing those actions, but this is a way for fraudsters to generate enormous quantities of traffic. So as you can see from the overlay, some of these numbers are truly large, like 125 billion per month. And then on the right-hand side, there's an example of a mainstream site, MySpace, that was using a monetization partner. And the monetization partner was the one that's cheating and using ad fraud and using bots to inflate their traffic numbers so that they can make more money. So all of this together shows you that ad fraud is a very large thing. And the reason that the trade associations, I'll again use US examples, and the fraud detection companies are reporting ad fraud to be low is because their technologies are primarily tuned for looking for bots, IVT, right? So if they're looking for fake traffic, they're going to see about 1%. But if they're not looking for all the other forms of fraud, like I said, ad stacking, pixel stuffing, forced redirects, pop-unders, apps loading ad impressions fraudulently and things like that, they might be missing the majority of the fraud. So in that case, the ad fraud that you read in the news is always severely underreported. So there's many, many kinds of fraud. And if you're only looking for bots, you're only seeing a tiny fraction of the fraud that is there. So let me spend a couple minutes on brand safety because that's an increasingly popular topic. What brand safety means is some advertisers are concerned that their ads are showing up next to inappropriate content. So they're paying for brand safety technology. But again, let me use an example from the US. The detection technology is actually working very poorly. So here are two screenshots where you see those cloud ads. Those are the brand safety detection vendor blocking ads on the front page of Wall Street Journal and New York Times, simply because those pages contain the word COVID-19. So in doing so, they're essentially blocking it based on keywords. So the reason I said brand safety technology works poorly is that they're primarily using keyword matching to do that. And so while they're blocking the ads on the front page of mainstream news outlets, they're not blocking the ads from going to fake news sites, right? So they're harming the real sites, but they're allowing the fake sites to get funding. So the two examples on the right-hand side are fake websites disguised to look like local news sites. And those sites are still able to monetize through digital advertising. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a table where many, many mainstream sites are incorrectly marked. So the percentages of their articles that are marked as unsafe is very high. So I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. The question is what to do. It's really about marketers getting more details and more analytics for themselves. So I'll use this example to illustrate. So some marketers are getting lots and lots of clicks. For example, you'll see a 9.4% average click-through rate. But if you just get those averages and the totals, you're going to miss what's on the right-hand side. When you get details and when you get line item breakdowns in your placement reports, you can see that each of these sites has 100% click-through rates, right? So what was hidden in the average of 9.4 click-through rate, if you see the details, you'll actually see, oh, well, these sites are the fraudulent ones, right? So when you get enough details in analytics, common sense will tell you what is fraudulent. So then you can go turn them off. Another example would be to get more detailed reporting than you are getting right now. So for example, when we look at hourly volume charts, right, you can see those two examples at the top where most of the ad impressions are blown out or shown or used up at midnight. So once the day ticks over, all of the ad impressions run. So then there's very, very few or no ad impressions left for the rest of the day. And then the bottom two examples are basically where you see the advertisers are not getting the reach that they thought. It's not, the ads are not going on to thousands and thousands of sites. They're only going on to maybe a handful of sites or several hundred sites. So typically the marketers are not getting the reach they thought they were getting in programmatic. So with that, that's a quick overview of the state of digital ad fraud globally. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dhiraj Gupta, founder of Mfiltrate, and Dhiraj will actually be showing a demo of bots hitting web pages.
Thank you, Dr. Fou, for a very interesting presentation. I think it gives us a lot of insights of how bots have impacted the digital advertising industry in the Western world. And there is no reason to expect it to be any better in the developing part in the Eastern Hemisphere. India is now growing in the programmatic campaign space, and more advertisers are considering more budgets on digital marketing in general compared to offline media. Which means that India trying to make sure that we are not making the same mistakes as what Dr. Fou just showed is important. So let me start with, just to give you a sense of how easy this is. So if you go on YouTube, right, I just searched for generate fake traffic online, right? And there are many such search results which if you want, you will see a lot of websites, videos, links, which are actually going to talk about how you can generate fake traffic. You can actually, it gives you a full support. It gives you full help as to how you can generate fake traffic for your website, or for that matter, any website, right? Now, this is just giving you a sense of that, fraudsters are not geeks sitting in some corner in a garage. Anyone like you and me can actually, simply by following instructions on all these support videos, run your own bot, generate traffic on any website, your own website if you're a publisher, or generate traffic towards an advertiser, and meet a lot of the KPIs or targets which are easy to otherwise, which are difficult to otherwise generate. So what we're going to do to give you a sense of this is take one bot which we have investigated in particular. This is called the Supreme Traffic Bot. We've been tracking this bot for almost 5 years now, and this bot has a complete YouTube channel. You'll get all sorts of help and support on it. But interestingly, this is a piece of software you can download from the website. Costs roughly about $70 for lifetime of use, and you can just run it on your laptop, or you can run it if you want on a server, if you want even more capacity, and you can do a lot of things on it. So I'm going to demonstrate how the Supreme Traffic Bot is used, right? What you can do, you can actually generate visits on any URL. By the way, all these visits will be tracked on tools like Google Analytics, like normal visits. You can set up delays, which will help you in meeting session duration measurements. A lot of advertisers measure traffic using thumb rules of bounce rates and session time. Unfortunately, with bots like these, you can actually set it up or even randomize it based on what you want. It can put in a built-in proxy handling, which means that different IP addresses are used. The same IP address will not be used, which is another thumb rule which a lot of advertisers use. And you can actually configure your own logic as to how you want to do. So the bot actually allows you to visit a website, fill up a form, for example, or do a login, and then do certain activity. So this, for example, a lot of advertisers think that using an OTP-based login is protection against fraud. Unfortunately not. We're going to demonstrate that. And 0% bounce rate. So all those advertisers who feel that low bounce rate is a measurement of quality, this bot can give you 0% bounce rate. So you can choose what is the bounce rate required. A fraudster can choose, and that's where the world is right now. Simulate any platform, browser. You want Android traffic, you want iOS traffic, you want a realistic traffic. Realistic traffic means that it's going to actually simulate the real world concentration of different browsers. And all of this, and by the way, it can bypass Captcha as well. All of this for something as simple as about $79. And you can just add to cart and buy for it. So with that, let's jump into Supreme Traffic Bot. Let's get a better understanding of what this bot can do. So what we've done here is we've taken this bot and we've installed it on a simple Windows laptop. And this is what you see as the interface. I'm going to run through some of the features and functionalities of this, and this will help you in getting a sense of how this bot works. Okay. So here you can actually select what files you want to use, what are the URLs you want this bot to reach. So you can give your own list, you can give your own website if you want to generate traffic there. In this example, we've selected roughly about 7 websites which are popular in India. No reason, just random selection. What you can do here is you can actually say how many times you want the bot to visit each website. And you also want to add delays. So this is for session duration, if you want to randomly delay sessions. And you can have different configuration options here to set those up. It also gives you options for setting up threads. So this helps you in triggering a lot of traffic together in a single shot, and do parallel processing. But there is more to it. If you see, the click internal URL is used to generate bounce rate, right? It's used to actually optimize and figure out how much bounce rate should you be having. So if you want 100% traffic and you want to set up a 10-second delay, what it means is that for all the visits it does, 100% of the visits, it will wait for 10 seconds. So the session duration is at least 10 seconds. And then it's going to randomly click one URL within that website. So that will mean that as the normal Google Analytics measurement of bounce rate, there will be 0 bounce, because every visit will actually result in one more click. You can actually choose which URL to click, or you can randomize it. So it will randomly choose what URL to click in the website, right? The second one is user agent. So a lot of advertisers try, either they want specific traffic or they want to see user agents which are diversified. So here you can actually choose, or you can actually choose something like realistic. We've selected a user-defined user agent because we wanted to simulate some of the newer user agents. You can actually set your own user agent if you want to. The next one is referrer. A lot of advertisers try and monitor the website from where the traffic came. In fact, a lot of fraud detection tools also use this. So if you are coming, for example, from google.com, then that's good. Suppose hopefully better traffic. If you're coming from wikipedia.com, again good. But if you're coming from, say, an adult website, then it actually helps the advertiser get a sense of what is the source from where the traffic is coming. But unfortunately, again, in the bot, you can actually set your own referrers and you can actually randomize it as well. So you can change as if the visits are coming from websites which are good, which are generally accepted, and advertisers will see these referrers in their Google Analytics as the source of traffic. Moving further, you can allow pop-ups, you can set up different IP addresses and so on. So all of those options remain available on the bot. There is also an option to bypass Captcha. So if the website has a Captcha, for example, a lead form filling website, the Captcha will get bypassed. The bot will automatically identify and solve the Captcha. That's the power of the bot. So that's where it is. You can choose some of these providers as well to solve the Captcha, interestingly. Okay, so the bot is very flexible in this. You define your proxies. You can set up different types of proxies. And finally, for more of the advanced users, it actually has option for script editor as well. So the bot is very, very flexible. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to run this for you. We're going to run this on the 7 URLs. We're going to see whether ads are actually getting triggered, what kind of ads are getting triggered. And that will help you in getting a sense of how wide or easy it is to run this and how wide this problem can be. So if you remember, we had selected 7 URLs and now we are visiting those URLs one by one. And here, if you see, those have come in. And as you can see now, ads have started coming on these visits. So we opened the indianexpress.com and you can start seeing, you are seeing ads being loaded in. These are all ads which any normal user would see. And obviously, whichever platform or the SSP or is being used by this website is not doing its job in identifying bot traffic, because as you can see, we've opened this on a bot and we can very easily configure this to open thousands of times, and all those ads will actually run. So Supreme Traffic Bot is an easy tool. Again, we obviously, as a mature fraud detection solution, I want to clarify that we don't recommend anyone to use this. So here we've opened Indian Express, and as you can see on the top right corner, we have one ad, another on the right hand side. All these ads are opening on the bot from a popular ad platform. And the whole page loads. Here is an interesting one. If you see, here is an ad which is grayed out. So it seems that some advertisers do have protection against the bot, and they obviously made sure the ad was not served, while other advertisers and platforms are serving the ad on the bot, as you can see on the right hand side. Now, here we've opened another website, financialexpress.com. Again, here you can see on the right-hand side ad which has come in. It's an earplug ad, remove earwax. It's come in here. The website again has opened up like normal. By the way, interestingly, there'll be a lot of sponsored native articles here, which will also get triggered by this bot. And again, if you're running native advertising or you're running sponsored ads, there were some sponsored links which just came in. All of them will actually get triggered by this bot and will act as views for them. Okay, now we've opened jagran.com, another popular website, and straight away on the header, we have an ad served by Google, it seems, Kill the Goblin. And on the right-hand side, we have a UP government ad against COVID. And again, these ads are getting triggered on this bot. on the website. Again, repeating and reconfirming that the publisher in itself is obviously having a normal website. These are all where the platform is not actually identifying the bot and is serving ads here. So the platform actually has to make sure that they are protecting you as an advertiser if you're depending on the platform, or you need to use a fraud detection service to identify cases like these. So Supreme Traffic Bot is just one of the tools. We've, by the way, not explained some of the complexity of this tool because we don't obviously want people to be using this tool and damage the ecosystem. So a lot of the complexity behind it we've actually hidden, and we are not explaining here. But be rest assured that for a lot of advertising agencies, this should be a wake-up call that this is the state of affairs of how easy it is to have a bot and run it. And what that means is that having the right protection is always going to be key. And the solution for this always is to be active on your data and see where and what kind of traffic is coming for your ads, and look at the incrementality for it. And that's actually going to help you in understanding whether your traffic is good, traffic which you are getting is good, or it's just bot generated like this one. Okay, with that interesting demonstration, I think I'm sure everyone in the audience is now clear that ad fraud is prevalent. It's something which is widespread, and to be honest, pretty easy to do. So you don't need to be a geek. You don't need to be a PhD sitting in a garage somewhere. You can actually be, very easily setting up a bot for yourself, just like we just demonstrated, and make a lot of money. And from the presentation which Dr.Fou you shared earlier, I think it's very interesting to note that even in the Western world, in developed markets, not only is this menace prevalent, but is actually growing as we speak, which means that in our part of the world, I'm sure this is a big problem, and all advertisers, agencies, etc., should be careful about. So very interesting thoughts from your presentation, Dr. Fou. I'll just use a couple of them to have carry this conversation forward. We keep seeing a lot of reports from trade bodies, from platforms themselves, who come out and say, hey, we have no fraud, or we have 1 or 2% fraud. I remember one of the largest platforms came out globally and said, we identified 2% fraud, and we actually refunded advertisers the money for 2% fraud. But a lot of statistics which you showed are clearly pointing out that the fraud is much, much higher than 2%, or, and so there is a fallacy here. So what's your thought on this? What's going wrong, and how can, how can we be sure of this 2% report, which we keep hearing about? What's your opinion about this?
Yeah, thank you, Dhiraj. Like I said earlier, I think that the fraud detection companies are underreporting on the fraud because their technologies are tending to be tuned for looking for bots only. So let me give you an example. It's called domain spoofing. So it's a form of fraud where fake sites are going to be pretending to be mainstream sites. Because if you think about it, if it's a fake site 123.com, if someone sees that domain, nobody's going to bid on that, right? Because they know it's clearly a fake site. But if those fake sites pretend to be New York Times, right? So they just literally in the bid request, they just put a fake, someone else's domain. They can get away with the fraud. So in that case, in the placement reports, it's reported as New York Times. So if the fraud detection companies don't take a few extra steps to look at that, they will think that it's fine, right? So you can tell that the bad guys are very clever, and their job is to evade detection so that they can keep making money fraudulently. So at all times, it's a good practice to assume that bad guys are able to trick the detection and get by. So it's nice to think that the fraud is low, but you really shouldn't assume that it's low because the trade associations told you it's low, right? It's really worth putting in the extra effort to keep an eye on it. And I really like to talk about sales, right? If the digital marketing is not driving incremental sales, then why are you spending money on it, right? So it's sometimes very hard to detect the fraud, but you use common sense. Is it actually driving business outcomes for you, right? That should be the focus of all the marketers.
Absolutely. I'll hold you down for that thought of driving ROI, I think. But I just want to spend 2 minutes on that. So what you're basically explaining is the problem which programmatic has been facing for some time, where basically I can say I'm New York Times and everyone will just assume that I'm telling the truth, right? It seems to be an honor-based system. And obviously fraudsters don't respect the honor code. I understand that the new technology allows for ads.txt, and ads.txt allows you to detect spoofing like this. But I think the point you're trying to explain is that a lot of the publishers don't support ads.txt, and if they do, then a lot of fraud detection companies or programmatic platforms are not actually using that effectively to make sure that advertisers' bid requests are not going to bad traffic.
There's one more thing. It's basically publishers that lie about it. So ads.txt is a text file, and they're relying on the publisher to be honest and put the accurate information in there. But if the publisher, meaning the website, is the cheater, not only are they going to be buying bot traffic to inflate their own ad revenues, they're also going to lie and cheat in their ads.txt file.
Yeah.
So the ads.txt files, even though it's a good idea, because it relies on people to be honest, it doesn't work that well in the real world. So good publishers are going to be honest about it. The fake ones and the fraudulent ones are going to lie about it. And here's one more example of that, right? We have the difference between direct sellers and resellers, right? So direct means they have a direct relationship with the ad exchange. Reseller means they're reselling someone else's inventory. So here in the US, as marketers become more mature, they're going to say, we want to buy direct only. So what do you think the bad guys are going to do? They're going to just alter their ads.txt files. So they're supposed to say they're a reseller because they're a reseller. They're just going to lie and change that label to direct. And so now they can tap into all the direct buys. So basically, that's why ads.txt doesn't work that well. It's because it relies on people to be honest, and obviously fraudsters are not honest.
So absolutely, and I think from an India context, and I know because we've been talking with a lot of advertisers and agencies, and ads.txt in itself is something which is, a lot of advertisers and agencies are unaware about it. So I think tip number one, very, very basic, doesn't solve your problem for sure, but please just make sure that you're bidding and running ads only on ads.txt inventory. I mean, that's like the first thing you should do. Of course, that doesn't mean that you have no fraud, as Dr.Fou just said. But if you're not even doing that, then you are actually, just getting anything and everything. Step two should be that you should try and focus on direct publishers wherever, all of this is direct inventory. By the way, all of these are standardized, which means that OpenRTB 2.5, 3.0 easily supports this. So if you're buying programmatic, all of these should be default options which you can enable on your setup. So as a tip, please make sure you have at least these in place. They don't solve your problem 100%, but they at least make sure that at a basic level you are covered, right? So that's one tip I think if advertising agencies can validate their campaigns for. So going back to the original question, Dr. Fou, I think what you were saying is that platforms, have, or trade bodies have been throwing up this flag saying, hey, fraud is just 1-2%, everything is fine, everything is hunky-dory, while the truth is much different. It's what they're actually consciously detecting as the base bots, while they're not even covering some of the most sophisticated cases, which are easily going through. But tell me one thing, and I'll use this as a cue for my second question. A lot of we've all been told, all advertisers and agencies have been said that programmatic traffic is clean, programmatic traffic is transparent. You have logs, you have data, you can actually check where my ad was served at an impression level, right? And it obviously allows you a lot of levers of blacklisting, controlling traffic. What's your opinion about that? Should you basically take all your budget and run on programmatic? Is programmatic actually the as clean as how it's been sold as? What's your thought on that?
Well, ad tech companies will obviously say programmatic is clean and transparent, just like snake oil salesmen will tell you it's going to heal all your diseases. Okay, so what do you think is going to, is the truth? So bottom line is, even though they say it's clean and transparent, it's the exact opposite. So let me use a case from the US. In the case of Uber, they were paying mobile exchanges to help them get app installs, right? They wanted more people to install the Uber app. But as it turns out, the mobile exchanges were not only falsifying the placement reports, so they're basically editing those placement reports to make it appear that the ads ran on good sites when they actually didn't. Some of them were actually fabricating the placement reports when they didn't even run any ads. So they were outright ripping off Uber by saying, okay, we ran all these ads, it went to all these websites, and here's the Excel spreadsheet that tell you all the details, but no ads were even run. They literally just made up the Excel spreadsheet, sent it to Uber, and then invoiced them. So in essence, because all of these things, unless you have a way of independently checking, if the ad networks or your agencies are just giving you Excel spreadsheets with summary numbers in them, even if there's line item details in them, if you don't have a way of independently checking it, I wouldn't trust those, because it gets back to the earlier point. We're dealing with fraudsters here, and it's all bits and bytes, and it's all Excel spreadsheets and dashboards, right? It's so easy for them to just make it up. So it's always the philosophy in buying programmatic is don't trust, always verify.
I think that should be the punchline for this session. I think that's a very good quote. I think we should end with that for sure. But the topic, I think I just want to touch on that aspect here. There are actually log generators. There are pieces of code which people have written, which you press a button and it will actually generate out DSP logs of impressions and clicks. And very, very great way for anyone to serve to the agency or the advertiser, saying, look, here are actual logs showing that these impression clicks ran, but all of them are actually generated by a piece of software, and they're randomized to look as if they're all correct, right?
Yes.
So you really can't you can't assume that what you are seeing is correct. You need an independent verification, and that verification needs to make sure that it's covering you across the wide range of fraud which is possible. I think that's the message which Dr. Fou you're trying to convey. And I do want to re-emphasize that programmatic is something which is very nascent in India. It's something which is increasing consistently. And when we talk to advertisers, we hear a common theme saying, hey, I'm running on programmatic. That's transparent. That should be clean. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And that means that as advertising agencies, if you are not conscious about this and you're not independently validating it, then you're probably looking at trouble.
Let me point out a very important point. You said independent verification. That's important, but just make sure you understand that independent verification from the existing fraud verification companies, the ones that are reporting the 1% to 2%, that's not good enough, right? They will say that they're independent verification, but if they cannot explain to you how they measured it and why something was marked as fraudulent and why something was marked as not fraudulent, that's not good enough, right? Basically, they could have made it up themselves. So I think the key thing is to have the analytics, have the supporting details so that you can understand why something is fraudulent or not fraudulent so that you can take action. So for example, the vendors, like Mfilter that actually shows you the supporting data, that's going to be very important.
No, absolutely. In fact, I'll briefly talk about this. A lot of some of the largest fraud detection players and some of the largest platforms have actually, created that setup that everything is about 2%. So I would recommend all advertisers agencies to simply ask for complete visit by visit or impression by impression or click by click data independently. Make sure you are validating every visit, impression, click, and know why it is getting marked as fraud. You'll actually be surprised that a lot of fraud detection partners actually do sampling. They're actually not evaluating every impression and click. They're actually sampling about 10% of the traffic and reporting you on that 10%. From whatever you've seen from the presentation Dr. Fou said and the bot demos, etc., you can actually see that how it's easy to spoof all of that and how it's easy to bypass. And if your fraud detection partner is just focusing on a 10% of the analysis, By the way, you're paying for 100%. He's actually evaluating only 10%.
Yep.
And of course, it statistically sounds nice, right? That it's a sampling, it's a statistical analysis. But something as big as ad fraud, where your dollars are being burned and you're paying for that, then do you really need to look at statistics, or do you want to have a deterministic system which can look at all of your data and report you back? A couple of points which I want to touch on, Dr. Fou. In your initial talk, you mentioned about ROI, and you talked about look at the ROI, which incrementality of the ROI which is coming in. I want to take 2 minutes on that. Some of the interesting frauds we've seen in recent times have been in the space of performance marketing, where things like cookie stuffing and click spamming, whether you're on web and app, accordingly, has been the way by which publishers, fraudsters have been able to show performance as well. So I just want to point that out, that just because you're getting performance doesn't mean that you don't have ad fraud. Of course, if you are getting performance, at least the basic fraud is covered for you because you're getting something out of it. But what you need to be careful about is how is the performance being measured. And things like cookie stuffing and click spamming are easy ways by which fraudsters can steal your own traffic, your own organic traffic, and give it back to you as if it's come from them. So these are interesting turn of events, because till now the advertiser's job would be simple, right? If I'm getting performance, then I'm fairly safe. Unfortunately, as more and more dollars are going into performance marketing, just because you're getting an ROI, you're getting sales in itself may not actually make sure that you are out. You need to look out for organic hijacking. You need to be looking out for cannibalization of your own traffic, and that I think is important to mention here.
Yeah, let me give more details on that topic of organic stealing. So the purchases are organic in the sense that they happened or they're going to happen anyway. But the fraudsters are basically tricking the reporting to make it appear that they drove those sales. So this is exactly the same phenomenon that was impacting Uber. So in their particular case, they would consider themselves performance marketers because they only paid cost per install, right? They don't pay when there's an impression. They don't pay when there's a click. They only pay when they got the outcome, the install. However, what they found out was that the mobile exchanges were falsifying the records and essentially claiming credit for the organic installs. And the way they found that out is that when they paused the mobile app install spending, they saw that the app installs continued, because humans installed the Uber app because they wanted to, not because they saw an ad and clicked on it. So essentially, all of those were organic installs anyway. The fraudsters simply tricked the reporting to make it appear that they had caused it, right? So they would get credit and earn the CPI. There's another example to make this very concrete. Due to a vulnerability in Google Analytics prior to version 4, which just launched at the end of last year, there's the ability for remarketing vendors to insert false data into Google Analytics. So if, for example, a person typed in a retailer and then went to it and purchased it, right? So they looked at 20 pages and then they purchased something. That is called a 20-page view direct visit that resulted in a purchase. What the vendors are doing is they're inserting one page view, a click at the beginning of that session. So they make it a 21-page view visit that makes it look like it was driven by one of their existing campaigns. So that purchase was an organic purchase, right? That happened anyway. These fraudsters are falsely claiming credit for that purchase. So in that case, they're making the performance reports appear to be so much better than reality, because they're essentially claiming sales that had already happened. So for the marketers, they're essentially paying extra for stuff that already happened, right? They didn't get those sales through the remarketing program. They already got those sales. They're now just paying the remarketing vendor under fraudulent pretenses.
No, very interesting. And, I think we've repeatedly seen this kind of a behavior across many of the advertisers we are working with, where someone comes, says, don't pay me on clicks, don't pay me on impressions, pay me only on conversions, which is an actual sale. And that sounds too good to be true, right? In the sense that I'm paying for a sale. So if I get a sale, I'm paying. Otherwise, I don't have any cost, right? Unfortunately, with behavior like this, it's very easy to spoof this out. advertisers need to be aware about it, and that's something which is important. So cookie stuffing and click spamming, I think tip number 2 for advertisers. If you are running performance link campaigns, please be on the lookout for these kind of fraudulent traffic, because you would actually be cannibalizing your own traffic and paying for your own traffic with zero incrementality. Dr. Fou, I'll move to another topic. So what are your tips? We've talked about a couple of tips in this conversation, and we've of course talked a lot about the problem. What are your thoughts on what should an advertiser or an agency do to solve this mess? So it's obviously serious enough. What should they do?
I think, like I said before, they need to get more detailed analytics. So, get hourly reports, for example, because there's certain things that may not necessarily be fraud, but it's suboptimal. So, for example, when you're buying large quantities of ads, if all the ads are shown between midnight and 4 a.m., then there's no ads left for when humans are actually awake and going online, right? So something like that is not necessarily fraud. It's just you won't see that if you get averages and totals, right? You have to get hourly reports to see when your ads actually ran. And you also want to know where your ads actually ran. So that's like what we said before, just have your own independent way of verifying, have analytics in place so that you can monitor it, so that you don't have to just trust or take the word of these vendors and or the fraudsters, because obviously either they're going to be directly lying to you or they're not going to actually know themselves either. So you have to be able to be vigilant yourself. So overall, just know that programmatic, the technologies are great. They help automate the buying and selling of ads. But because it's automated, it's also allowed more fraudsters to commit more fraud. So if you're going to use programmatic, it just means you have to be extra vigilant. It's not a set it and forget it and then just expect it to run. So despite all the press releases from the trade associations telling you fraud is low, I would say if you really care about your business outcomes and incrementality from your digital campaigns, you have to put in the work. Otherwise, you're just getting ripped off.
In fact, I'll take an Indian example very quickly on something which has recently happened. Last year happened. There was Badshah, who's a pop singer, right? He was caught by the Mumbai police buying views and impressions on his YouTube video. He basically spent about 72 lakhs and got 72 million. Paid 10 paisa a view. I think pretty good price for a bot visit, by the way. And basically, what basically is important to understand is that on all those fake views, when those were drawn, advertiser ads would have come, and the advertiser ads would have also got triggered, which means that all the advertisers out there, potentially you also lost a percentage of your ad campaign because of this. So whenever there is someone running bot views on content, it could be a YouTube, it could be a Facebook, it could be any article which otherwise seems to be okay. The problem is that there are enough reasons for people to have more views, more likes, more comments, and all of those bots can do. And when they do that, they actually trigger advertising. I think, as Dr. Fou said, be on the lookout for your own data. In fact, in my opinion, digital advertising is no longer about creativity. It's equally about data sciences. It's equally about you being able to pass through millions and millions of records and being able to come out with conclusions. So in fact, my recommendation to every advertiser is have a data sciences person in your team. I think it's more important now than just having a creative team, because while marketing in general is about creativity, but I think digital ad tech has made data being the king. And if you want to take the benefit of digital advertising, then you have to be able to process that data and look at all those records to come to a conclusion. Dr. Fou, I think we're out of time, but do you want to pass any passing remarks on this whole conversation from your side?
No, I think people, hopefully this gives them a glimpse of the state of ad fraud, both globally and in the US. And there's many lessons that we can learn from the experience that we've seen over here in the US. So as new markets, emerging markets start to use more programmatic, they can avoid making the mistakes that have been made by big advertisers here in the US and basically wasted billions of dollars on their side. So hopefully emerging markets like India will make sure that they don't waste the kind of dollars in programmatic.
Yeah, I think finally it's about making sure you're getting more bang for your buck. And as long as you're able to put in those checks and balances and looking at data, I think this is something which would make sense for you. And your ROI should actually get driven from the fraud detection itself. So the fraud detection can actually generate more ROI for you from the savings of the fraud. That's the level of fraud which is there in the market. If someone tells you a 2%, then you know from this conversation that that doesn't mean anything. So with that, I would like to close this. Thank you so much, MMA, for giving us this opportunity. And thank you, Dr. Fou, for coming on this session.
Thank you, Dhiraj.
Take care.